My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 72 years old, a retired schoolteacher, and the woman who practically raised my grandchildren while my son and his wife chased careers and cocktails. For 15 years I changed diapers, packed school lunches, and picked them up from soccer practice, never once asking for a dime or even a thank you. All I wanted was to be included, to be loved, to be seen. But one Sunday morning at a crowded brunch table, my daughter-in-law, Lauren, looked across her mimosa and said words that cracked something inside me forever. "She's just the babysitter," she said casually, laughing toward one of her friends. "I mean, she's not really family, not like involved. You know." My fork clattered against my plate. Everyone fell silent. My son Mitchell looked down, pretending not to hear. My grandson blinked, confused. The clinking of silverware was the only sound that filled the air. But inside me, a storm had erupted. I pushed my chair back, stood up calmly, too calmly, and said, "Well, if I'm just the babysitter, I guess I should be charging you all hourly. And maybe finding another family who actually values me." Then I walked out of that restaurant without touching my food, without another word, leaving them to chew on their embarrassment. I went straight home, made a phone call that would change everything, and by sunrise the next day, the house they all lived in, my house, was under contract. Sold. Just like that. But I didn't tell them yet. Not until they walked into the kitchen and found strangers measuring the windows. Their mouths fell open. Lauren dropped her designer bag. And Mitchell. He turned pale. "Mom, what's going on?" I took a slow sip of my tea. "Ask the babysitter," I said. "But let me take you back to how we got here. Because this didn't happen overnight. No. It started years ago, when I gave up everything to help them build a life, never suspecting they'd one day try to erase mine. Started with love. But it wouldn't stay that way. And if you think that was the worst they did, you haven't heard anything yet. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you believe no one deserves to be treated like they're disposable, especially not grandmothers who gave up everything for their families. Your voice matters. So does mine. Let's keep going. Mitchell was always my golden boy. From the moment he took his first steps in our tiny Kansas kitchen, barefoot and grinning with peanut butter on his cheeks, I swore I'd give him the world. When his father passed away from a sudden stroke, Mitchell was only 13. I was devastated, but I pulled myself together, went back to teaching full-time, and made sure my son had everything he needed. Football camps, college prep, counseling, love. When he met Lauren, I was cautious. She was beautiful, poised, and driven. Too driven, maybe. She talked about climbing the social ladder, more than she talked about love. But Mitchell loved her fiercely, and I wanted to believe love would be enough. At their wedding I gave a toast. I remember my hands shaking, heart pounding. I said, "May you never forget the power of kindness, and may you always remember where you come from." Lauren barely smiled. Mitchell kissed my cheek and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. I wouldn't be here without you." Back then I believed him. The first year of their marriage, they lived in a condo downtown. Expensive, too far from both their jobs. They struggled. One day Mitchell called and asked, "Mom, could we move into the old house with you? Just until we get back on our feet." Course I said yes. I cleaned out the guest room, stocked the fridge, and baked Lauren's favorite lemon squares. They moved in that weekend. Lauren barely said thank you. Still I gave them space. I moved into the back bedroom. I made myself scarce when they needed time. I helped with their newborn son, Jacob, every night while they worked late. I changed diapers, rocked him to sleep, sang the lullabies I once sang to Mitchell. Weeks turned into months, then years. They never moved out. And I never complained. But somewhere in those years something shifted. Lauren started calling the house our home at dinner parties, even though the deed still had my name. Mitchell stopped checking in with me about house decisions. They repainted walls, replaced the furniture I'd bought, and hired decorators who didn't even ask me for input. They said things like, "It's time to modernize. The house looks like a retirement brochure." I said nothing. When Lauren got pregnant with their second child, she sat me down, not to thank me, but to ask if I could commit to full-time babysitting, Just until the baby's in preschool. No pressure, Evelyn, she added, smiling too wide. But daycare is so expensive. Said yes again. Because I loved those children like they were my own. Because I remembered what it felt like to have no one to turn to. Because I still believed they saw me as family. But slowly I became invisible. They had family photos taken without me. They hosted backyard barbecues. I was told to stay inside so the guests wouldn't be overwhelmed. One afternoon I overheard Lauren on the phone. Yeah, she's still here. Ugh, I mean it's like living with the help. But free help, you know. Free help. I went to bed that night and cried quietly into my pillow. I didn't confront them. I didn't have the strength. I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she was just venting. But I stopped leaving my room as often. I stayed quiet. Folded laundry. I swept floors. Fed the dog. Packed school lunches. And every morning I put on a brave smile. Until that brunch. That single moment when she laughed and called me just the babysitter. It was like all the quiet heartbreaks over the years gathered at once and screamed inside me. And in that scream, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. They didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. They didn't respect me. They tolerated me because I was useful. And I had allowed it. That night after brunch, I went into my room and opened the old filing cabinet. There at the very back was the deed. The house was mine. Paid off decades ago. Mitchell never put a cent into it. I kept every document, every bill, every receipt. My name was the only one that ever mattered on that paper. Called my lawyer. Then I called a realtor I trusted. I want to sell. Immediately. Quietly. No heads up to the occupants until we've finalized the offer. He paused, surprised. Are you sure, Evelyn? I swallowed my fear and said, more than I've ever been. By dawn we had an interested buyer. A young couple from out of state. All cash. I signed the paperwork. A weight lifted off my chest. I slept for the first time in months. The next morning, when the new owners showed up for measurements and walkthroughs, I stayed calm. I made my tea. Sat at the kitchen table. Waited. Lauren came down first in her silk robe, confused. Then Mitchell. They looked between the strangers and me like they'd seen ghosts. What's going on? He asked. I looked at them both and smiled sweetly. You remember how I'm just the babysitter? Yes. Well, the babysitter's off duty. And this house. It's no longer your concern. Lauren gasped. You're joking. Oh, I never joke about money, I said. You've got 30 days to leave. Mitchell stepped forward. Mom, this is insane. Where are we supposed to go? I sipped my tea and said nothing. But inside my heart pounded. Because I wasn't done yet. What I had planned next would finally show them who I really was. And trust me, I was just getting started. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you believe that no one, especially a grandmother, should be taken for granted. Respect is not earned by blood. It's earned by how you treat people. Keep watching to see what happens next. The news spread like wildfire through the family chat. My niece called me in shock. My sister texted, Evelyn, what are you doing? But I ignored them. I didn't owe anyone explanations anymore. For once, I was putting myself first. Mitchell and Lauren avoided me for days. They didn't speak to me, didn't acknowledge me in the hallway. Lauren slammed doors loudly, made dramatic sighs, and huffed around the kitchen like a wounded queen. Mitchell. He looked embarrassed more than angry. Ashamed even. But he said nothing. Not one apology. Not one. Mom, I'm sorry. That hurt more than I expected. One evening he finally knocked on my bedroom door. Can we talk? I opened it, standing with my arms folded. Talk. He shifted uncomfortably. You blindsided us, Mom. I mean, why now? Why like this? I stared at him. My son. The same boy I once walked to school in the snow, who used to sleep with his hand in mine when he had nightmares. Do you really not know? I asked quietly. He looked away. Every time she spoke to me like I was beneath her, you said nothing. Every time I was excluded, dismissed, or erased, you looked away. I gave you everything. And now, you let her humiliate me at a restaurant full of strangers." His lips trembled. "You're right. I should have." I shook my head. "It's not just about should. You let me become a ghost in my own home." He whispered, "Where are we supposed to go?" I swallowed hard. "You're both adults. Figure it out." He left without another word. That night, I sat by the window and cried. Not out of regret, but out of grief. For the years I lost thinking I was building something sacred, only to discover I was building it alone. The next day, Lauren sent the children into my room. "Grandma, are we moving?" Jacob asked, his eyes wide. I knelt and hugged him tightly. "Yes, baby. You'll have a new adventure. But Grandma will always be nearby." Did we do something wrong? That shattered me. "No," I whispered, wiping his cheek. "You're perfect. It's the grown-ups who need to learn better." Lauren had weaponized those children before, and I knew she was doing it again, sending them in to guilt me. But not this time. I began preparing to move out myself. I had found a cozy 2-bedroom in a retirement community not far from town, peaceful with a garden and a library. I packed my things quietly, room by room, letting go of old photo albums, lace doilies, and the teacups no one appreciated anymore. But something strange started happening. Lauren began slamming cupboards louder. I caught her on the phone one night, whispering frantically. "She's serious. What if she tells people? What if she makes it public?" Mitchell replied. "Just keep her calm. We still have time." Time. For what? That's when I realized. They weren't just shocked. They were scared. I hadn't thought of it before, but maybe, just maybe, the house wasn't the only thing they were trying to control. Maybe they were hiding more. Something deeper. I started looking closer. Lauren's mail was always locked away. She got defensive if anyone went near the office. Mitchell had started staying out late, even overnight, saying work's been crazy. And then one day, while folding laundry, a small envelope slipped from one of Mitchell's jacket pockets. It was addressed to someone named Carla. The return address. A hotel suite in another city. Froze. Was he having an affair? Or worse? Were they planning something else behind my back? I didn't know yet. But something told me the betrayal ran deeper than I imagined. And if I was going to get justice, not just revenge, I had to dig into the very foundation of their lies. Because the house was just the beginning. What I'd uncover next would expose their entire world. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or made to feel invisible by the very people you loved most. Your story matters just like mine. Stay with me, because we're about to go deeper than ever before. That envelope changed everything. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding it with trembling hands, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Carla. Who was Carla? Why was her name in my son's jacket? And why was the envelope from a luxury hotel in another city when Mitchell claimed he was working overtime? The betrayal stung sharper than I expected. I had just come to terms with Lauren's cruelty. Now I had to ask myself whether my own son, the boy I raised on bedtime stories and peanut butter sandwiches, was hiding even more from me than I ever imagined. I placed the envelope in a safe spot in my drawer and made a quiet decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. I needed to know everything first. If they thought I was just the babysitter, then I would play that role perfectly. Silent, invisible, always in the background. But this time I was watching. Over the next few days I paid attention to everything. Who came to the house, what times Mitchell left and returned, how Lauren spent hours on the phone and always walked away when she noticed me nearby. Then came a night that changed everything again. I was up late making myself a cup of chamomile tea when I heard voices coming from the backyard. Quiet but urgent. I stepped toward the sliding glass door, careful not to make a sound. Mitchell and Lauren were standing close, arguing in whispers. "She's not going to go down quietly," Lauren said. "We don't need her to go down. Just out," Mitchell replied. "I still say we should have pushed her into that home months ago." We could have listed the house under my name by now. We can't list it under your name, Lauren. You're not on the deed, he snapped. She huffed. Well, maybe if your mother wasn't so stubborn, we wouldn't be scrambling like this. You promised me that house would be ours by Christmas. I didn't think she'd actually sell it. I stepped back slowly, my breath caught in my throat. So they had planned to push me out, strip me of ownership, maybe even declare me mentally unfit to take control of my own property. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by my window, watching the moonlight stretch over the quiet street, and I whispered to myself, they wanted to erase me, but I was not going to vanish. The next morning I called a lawyer. Not just the one who helped sell the house, but someone who specialized in elder abuse and estate protection. I booked a full consultation. I brought every document I had. Deeds, tax records, letters, even that envelope addressed to Carla. Mrs. Carter, the lawyer said after a few minutes of flipping through the pages, you've done everything right. You've got a clean paper trail. And this envelope. He studied the address and typed something into his computer. She works at that hotel, he said. Carla Monroe. Recently divorced. Listed as receiving monthly transfers from an LLC under your son's name. Blinked. So he is. The lawyer nodded solemnly. It's very likely he's been supporting her. Financially. Possibly even using your address to hide the trail. And if your daughter-in-law doesn't know. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the armrest of my chair. My son. My golden boy. Living a double life under my roof. Using my name. Hiding behind the woman he claimed to protect. This was deeper than betrayal. This was fraud. I want to know everything, I said. And I want it documented. For the next week, I kept my distance, playing the part of the quiet old woman while my lawyer did the digging. What we uncovered made my stomach turn. Mitchell had been quietly moving money from a joint business account he and Lauren managed into a private fund. Lauren, it turned out, had been filing for credit cards under my address without my consent. She was using my good name and credit score to fuel her lifestyle. Buying handbags, planning events, and even making down payments on properties I knew nothing about. They had both been using me. Not just emotionally, financially, legally. I remember staring out at the garden one morning, Jacob playing quietly by the tree I planted for Mitchell when he was 8. I felt tears welling again, but this time not just from heartbreak, from fury. They had stolen my name, my trust, and my love, and turned it into currency for their convenience. It was time to turn the tables. That evening, I walked into the dining room where they were both sitting. I held a small file in my hand, just thick enough to get their attention. I had lunch with my lawyer, I said calmly. Lauren froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. Mitchell stiffened. What lawyer? The one helping me prepare the lawsuit. Their faces paled in unison. I placed the folder on the table and opened it, letting them see the first page. A full printed report with both their names at the top. What is this? Lauren asked, trying to snatch it, but I closed the folder. It's proof, I said. Of what you've done. Of the credit cards you opened in my name. Of the business account you drained, Mitchell. And of Carla. He flinched. You've got 3 days, I said. To pack, to explain to your children why they're leaving their home, and to prepare yourselves. Because if you think I'm bluffing, go ahead and call your lawyer. I walked out before they could speak. My hands shook, but my heart felt like it was breathing again for the first time in years. Still, I knew this wasn't over. People like Lauren didn't go down without a fight. And Mitchell, he wasn't the son I once knew. Whatever they were planning now would be desperate. But I was ready. Because I wasn't done protecting myself. And I had one final move that would end it all. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you believe that standing up for yourself isn't cruelty. It's survival. Don't let guilt silence your truth. This story is just beginning, and the next chapter. It's the storm they never saw coming. 3 days passed in a haze of tension so thick you could slice it with a butter knife. Lauren barely looked at me. When she did, it was like staring into the eyes of a panicked animal, snarling to protect its den. Mitchell kept pacing the hallways, rubbing his forehead, mumbling into his phone. I could hear the desperation in his voice. He wasn't calling lawyers, he was calling people to bail him out. Friends, business partners, anyone who would listen. No one did. And me. I watered my plants. I played classical music a little louder than usual. I even baked cookies with Jacob and his little sister, Emma. The children didn't know what was going on, and I wasn't going to taint their innocence with the rot their parents had grown in this house. But every second I waited. Waited for the retaliation. Because I knew it was coming. And it did. On the third night at 2 a.m. I heard a knock on my door. It wasn't Lauren or Mitchell. It was the police. I opened the door in my robe, heart pounding. "Yes, officers." "Ma'am," the younger one said, scanning a piece of paper. "We've received a call reporting concerns about your mental health, that you may be a danger to yourself or others. We're required to perform a wellness check." My body went cold. "Lauren." I stepped aside, voice steady. "Come in. You're welcome to look around." They did. They checked the kitchen, my medication drawer, even asked me basic cognitive questions. I answered every one with a calm smile. After 15 minutes, the older officer pulled me aside. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. You're clearly in full control. This happens more than you think when families are in conflict. Would you like to file a report for false claims?" I looked toward the hallway. I could see Mitchell's shadow behind the stair rail. "No," I said. "But thank you." As they left, I turned slowly toward where I knew they were hiding. "I see you," I said. "And I won't forget this." The next morning I called my lawyer again. "They tried to get you committed?" she asked, horrified. "They did," I replied, voice steel. "Now I'm done playing nice." She advised me to file a protective order. Declined for now. Instead, I made another move. I contacted Carla. Took some work. A private investigator made the call, posing as a property developer interested in Carla's background for a potential concierge job. Got her talking. Turns out, Carla had no idea Mitchell was still married. "I thought they were separated," she said, recorded on tape. "He told me he was just staying with his mother until the divorce finalized." That was enough. Enough to crush the fantasy they had built. I sent a copy of the recording, along with photos of Lauren's credit fraud, to Mitchell and Lauren in a sealed envelope. Inside, I included one handwritten note. I was quiet, not stupid. "You have 24 hours to leave." The blow came faster than I expected. Lauren burst into my room that night, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You're destroying us." I looked up from my book. "No. You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided I didn't matter. We have nowhere to go. You're throwing your grandchildren into the streets." My voice didn't rise. I didn't shake. Children need honesty more than they need walls. And trust me, this house has seen enough lies. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard one of my paintings rattled to the floor. Mitchell didn't speak to me again. But the next morning I watched them pack. They loaded up their luxury SUV. Boxes stacked so high the trunk wouldn't close. Lauren shouted at him the whole time, snapping at the kids, dragging garbage bags instead of suitcases. It was a fitting end. Chaotic, bitter, and empty. Jacob turned back and waved as they pulled out. I waved back, then turned and walked inside without shedding a tear. The house was mine again. Quiet. Well. But this wasn't about the house anymore. It was about what I'd built, and what I'd allowed to be taken from me. I spent that night writing a letter. One I hadn't planned to write. It was to Mitchell. I poured out everything. My sacrifices, my heartbreak, my hopes. I told him how proud I once was, and how ashamed I had become. I told him that even now, despite it all, a part of me would always love him. But I couldn't let him back into my life until he understood what real love, respect, and accountability looked like. I left the letter unsealed. I didn't know yet if I'd send it, because something else was brewing. 3 days later I got a letter in return. From a woman named Carla. She had seen the bank records. She had questions. and I had answers that would break everything Mitchell had ever built, if I chose to use them. But was I ready to bring it all to light? Was I willing to take this all the way? Because the war they started wasn't over. And now I held the last piece of power. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you've ever had to reclaim your worth after being diminished. What would you do if you had the truth that could shatter someone's carefully crafted lie? Stay tuned. Because in the next chapter, you'll see what happens when silence ends and justice begins. The letter from Carla arrived on a Tuesday. It was handwritten, 3 pages long, every word aching with confusion, betrayal, and disbelief. She wrote in neat cursive, the kind that spoke of old-fashioned manners and heartbreak. "I don't know who you are exactly, but I know now that Mitchell lied to me," she wrote. "He told me he was staying with his elderly mother temporarily after a difficult separation. I didn't know he was still married. I didn't know about Lauren. And I certainly didn't know I was just another pawn in whatever life he built for himself." She said she had receipts, text messages, bank records, proof. But she wasn't threatening. She was reaching out, seeking solidarity. I folded the letter with trembling hands and stared out my kitchen window. I hadn't heard from Mitchell or Lauren since they packed up and vanished. No apology, no follow-up, just silence. And in that silence, something unexpected grew. Freedom. I cooked dinner and didn't feel obligated to set aside a plate for anyone else. I slept through the night without the sound of their late-night fights. I watched old films and didn't have to turn the volume down out of courtesy. But the wound lingered. You don't unlove a child overnight, even when they've wronged you. Still, I couldn't forget what they tried to do, what they almost got away with. Lauren used my credit to fund her vanity projects. Mitchell lied to 2 women and nearly ruined both our lives. And now, with Carla's letter, I held the power to expose all of it, publicly. But the question gnawed at me. Would that bring healing or just more destruction? I needed clarity, so I decided to meet Carla. We agreed to have tea at a quiet cafe on the other side of town. I wore a modest floral dress and a string of pearls, my armor. She arrived in a blazer and jeans, her eyes tired but kind. "Evelyn?" she asked cautiously. He nodded. "And you must be Carla." We sat across from each other. First it was awkward. 2 women, both betrayed by the same man, picking up shards of a story we didn't write. But within 10 minutes, it felt like we'd known each other for years. She showed me her phone. Photos of Mitchell in that hotel room. Screenshots of texts that read like honey-dripped poison. "I wish my wife were more like you. She doesn't understand me like you do. Once I get my hands on the house, we'll have a real place to call ours." That one hit like a slap. "He said that," I whispered. Carla nodded. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I truly didn't know." I believed her. She wasn't like Lauren. There was no malice in her. Just disappointment and pain. "I've hired a lawyer," she said quietly. "I won't be silent anymore. He used me. And from what you've told me, he used you too." I nodded slowly. "Yes. But I'm not sure if I want revenge or justice." Carla reached across the table. "Sometimes they're the same thing." That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a blanket over my shoulders, staring at the stars, wondering how far I was willing to go. Not just for me, but for the version of Mitchell that still lived in my memories. The little boy who brought me dandelions, the teenager who cried into my shoulder the day his father died. Could I destroy him? Then again, hadn't he already destroyed us? The next morning I made 2 phone calls. First to my lawyer. "Prepare everything," I said. "If Mitchell or Lauren ever try to come near me again, I want every record filed. Carla's, mine, the house, the fraud. All of it." Second to Carla. "Would you be willing to speak publicly?" Yes. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Yes. If you are." And just like that a plan began to form. We would write a joint letter to Mitchell. No threats, no lawyers, just the truth. In black and white. A mirror to show him the man he had become. We met again to write it. Side by side. Two women who'd been deceived, finding power not in vengeance, but in truth. We wrote about the lies, the manipulation, the love we gave, and the pain we received in return. We ended it simply. We see you now. Fully. And we will not let you rewrite our story again. We mailed it that same day. Then we waited. 1 week passed. Nothing. Then, on a Friday afternoon, a letter came. From Mitchell. It was only a few lines. I never meant to hurt you. Either of you. I was drowning and I thought I could build a raft out of lies. Failed you both. I don't expect forgiveness. But I do know this. You were both better to me than I ever deserved. He didn't sign it, your son. Just Mitchell. I folded the letter and put it away. It wasn't closure. But it was something. Still, I had one more chapter to write. Not for Mitchell. Not for Carla. But for me. Because this story wasn't about what they did. It was about what I chose to do next. And my next move would be the boldest one yet. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you believe healing begins the moment you take your story back. What would you do if the lies in your life suddenly came into the light? Stick with me because in the next chapter, I begin building a life they never imagined I could. After Carla and I mailed that letter and I read Mitchell's pitiful reply, something in me shifted. Not out of anger but clarity. He didn't deny it. He didn't justify it. And most importantly, he didn't beg. That told me all I needed to know. He wasn't sorry because he realized what he did was wrong. He was sorry because the truth caught up to him. But the real victory. I wasn't waiting for his remorse anymore. I had spent years being reduced to just the babysitter. A shadow in my own house, a free service for people who thought I was lucky to have a roof over my head. My roof, mind you. But I wasn't a shadow. I was the one who built the foundation they walked on. I was the one who kept the lights on. I was the one who gave love when all they gave back was distance. And now I was going to build something entirely my own. The house sold quickly as I expected. The new owners were a lovely couple in their early 30s, respectful, excited, and most importantly, kind. They brought me flowers on the day of the final walkthrough and told me they could feel the love in the bones of the house. I smiled and said quietly, "Take care of her." She held my whole heart for a long time. And then I walked away from the only place I had called home for over 4 decades. But I wasn't walking into emptiness. I was walking toward freedom. I moved into my new place the next day. A small cottage on the edge of town, tucked beneath willow trees and surrounded by soft wildflowers. It had a reading nook by the window and a small garden I could tend every morning. There were no footsteps above me, no slammed doors, no snide remarks from the hallway. Just peace. Me. That first week, I slept with the windows open. The breeze smelled like lilacs and freedom. Carla came to visit one weekend, and we sat on the porch drinking sweet tea, laughing about nothing and everything. "I still can't believe I thought he was the answer," she said, shaking her head. "We all fall for the packaging sometimes," I replied. "But when you open the box and there's nothing but lies inside, you have to return it." We clinked our glasses, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel betrayed. I felt light. But as light as I felt, I knew the story wasn't completely over. 'Cause 2 weeks later Jacob showed up. Alone. I found him sitting on my porch steps after church one Sunday, clutching a little duffel bag. "Hi, Grandma." My breath caught. "Jacob, honey, what are you doing here?" His eyes filled with tears. "Mom and Dad won't stop yelling. I heard them say your name. I just wanted to be where it's quiet." I pulled him into my arms and held him close. He was 12 now, old enough to know things weren't okay, but still young enough to want safety and comfort. He hadn't come for toys or cookies. He came for truth. I made him dinner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and we sat in the garden. He looked at me and asked, "Is it true Dad tried to steal your house?" I didn't lie. "Yes," I said. But I stopped him. He nodded like he already knew. "I miss you. Mom says you're being mean. But you never were." I placed my hand over his. Sometimes people lie to protect themselves. And sometimes they lie to hide from what they've done. But I'll never lie to you, Jacob. That's a promise. He stayed the night. Mitchell came by the next morning, furious. You went behind our backs and brought him here. He showed up on his own, I replied, standing tall. Because the place he lives doesn't feel like home. You don't get to say that. You left us. No, I said, stepping closer. You lost me. His mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled out of water. He had nothing. No more lies. No more spin. You want to keep your son, said. Then be a better man. Be the kind of man he wants to come home to. He didn't reply. I let Jacob decide whether to stay or go. He stayed another night. Lauren never came for him. That told me more than anything else ever could. Eventually, Mitchell came to pick him up, quiet, eyes low. I'll work on it, he mumbled. I don't want him to see me the way you do. You should hope he doesn't, I said. After they left, I sat on the porch and breathed deep. I had stood up for myself. I had exposed the lies. I had protected the truth. But I also left the door open for healing, if they ever chose it. This story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about awakening. I didn't just sell a house. I reclaimed my soul. But I wasn't done yet. Because the local news. They just picked up the story of a senior citizen who exposed identity theft and financial abuse from her own family. An issue affecting thousands of elders in silence. They wanted an interview. And I said yes. Not for fame. Not for spite. But so that one more grandmother, sitting in silence, would find her voice again. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you believe it's never too late to take back your power. And that silence should never be mistaken for weakness. Because in the next chapter, I raise my voice for every woman who was ever told to sit down and stay quiet. I didn't sleep the night before the interview. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, wondering if I was really ready to put my pain into words for the whole world to hear. But the truth was, I had already told the story in pieces. To my lawyer. To Carla. Jacob. It was time the world heard it too. The next morning I wore my blue blouse, the one my husband loved before he passed, and a pair of pearl earrings he gave me on our last anniversary. I brushed my silver hair, sat up straight, and walked into that studio like I'd walked into my own classroom 1,000 times before. The reporter was kind. Young woman. Her name was Natalie. She shook my hand with both of hers. I want you to feel safe telling your story, she said gently. He nodded. It's not safety I need. It's justice. She smiled and gave me a look that said she understood more than she was letting on. The lights came on. The camera rolled. And I spoke. I told them about raising my son as a widow. About letting him and his wife live in my house rent-free for 15 years. About becoming the live-in babysitter, the cook, the invisible maid. About Lauren calling me, just the babysitter, in front of strangers. About selling the house the very next morning. I told them about the forged credit cards, the secret bank transfers, the affair. The fake wellness check meant to silence me. The betrayal. But I didn't tell it as a victim. I told it as a woman who had finally remembered her worth. I ended by looking directly into the camera. To anyone watching this who's been made to feel like they don't matter, especially to the mothers and grandmothers who gave everything and got silence in return, I want you to know you're not weak. You're not crazy. And you're not just the babysitter. You are the foundation. And you deserve more than crumbs of respect. The footage aired that evening. And everything changed. My phone rang nonstop. Friends I hadn't heard from in years called crying. A women's shelter director asked if I'd come speak at a local event. A lawyer emailed offering to represent other seniors in similar situations. Pro bono. Even Carla reached out again. This has legs, she said. You don't just have a story. You have a voice. By the end of the week, a senior advocacy group asked me to join their board. I wasn't sure if I was qualified. I didn't have a degree in social work. But they said, you lived it. That's more than enough. So I joined. I went from feeling discarded to feeling powerful. But with power came attention. Lauren resurfaced. She didn't call or write. She showed up. It was a Saturday. I was gardening. I saw her out the corner of my eye, standing at the edge of my white picket fence like a shadow that didn't belong in the sunlight. I stood slowly, wiping my hands on my apron. "Lauren," I said, not surprised. "What brings you here?" She looked thinner, tired. Her makeup wasn't perfect this time. Her voice cracked. I didn't come to fight. I wanted to say I watched the interview." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't lie about you," I said. She shook her head. "No, you didn't. You made me see myself in a way I never had to before." There was silence. Birds chirp. A wind chime clinked gently behind me. "I lost everything," she said. "Our business collapsed after the investigation. Mitchell's out of work. The kids, they ask about you." I swallowed hard. She stared down at her shoes. "I was cruel. I thought you were just there. I didn't think about what it cost you." I said nothing. She finally looked up. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I do want my kids to know the woman who loved them." And there it was. Not redemption, but recognition. I nodded slowly. "They'll always have a place in my life. But you and Mitchell have work to do. A lot of it. I won't step into chaos just because you're hurting now." "I understand," she whispered. She turned and walked away. I stood there, heart heavy, not with sadness but with the weight of healing. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. That evening, I sat on the porch with a hot cup of tea, watching the sunset melt into the horizon. Jacob called. He told me about his science project. Emma chimed in, asking if I'd come to her dance recital. "Yes, my loves," I said. "Grandma will be there." The sun dipped lower. The sky turned gold. And in that moment I realized I hadn't just survived betrayal. I had rewritten my story. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you've ever had to build yourself back from silence, from hurt, from being just anything. You are never just a role. You are the whole story. And in the next chapter, I open a new door, one I never thought I'd walk through again. A month after the interview aired, I received a letter that stopped me cold. It came in a plain white envelope, no return address, no stamp. Someone had dropped it off in person. My name was written neatly on the front, in handwriting I hadn't seen since my husband passed away. But I'd know it anywhere. Inside was a check. And a note. "For all the years you gave and the ones they took from you. You deserve to choose now, Evelyn. With love, Martin." Martin had been my late husband's best friend. After Henry passed, Martin would call once in a while to check on me. He always respected the space I needed. And now, all these years later, he was the one who showed up, quietly, gently, with a check for $25,000 and a message that said I was seen. I held the paper in my hand and tears stung my eyes, not from the money but from what it meant. Someone had been watching. Someone still believed I was worthy. Not as a babysitter. Not as a background character. But as me. I didn't cash the check. Instead, I invited Martin over. We had coffee in the garden just like we used to years ago. He looked older now. Wiser. The grief in his eyes mirrored my own. But there was a softness between us. A quiet understanding forged by decades of shared loss. "You didn't have to do this," I told him. He smiled. "I wanted to. And not because I pity you. But because I admire you." I looked away a bit shy. "I saw the interview," he continued. "I saw the woman who held a family together with nothing but her bare hands and a hopeful heart. And when they tried to break you, you stood taller. That evening we sat under the stars talking about everything. Henry, our pasts, the strange twists of life. It was the first time in years I let someone see me. Truly see me. Not as grandma. Not as just the babysitter. But as Evelyn. Woman. Whole. Life. Meanwhile, things continued to unfold with Carla. She had filed her own case against Mitchell. Identity fraud and emotional damages. The court proceedings were underway, and she kept me updated. She said the judge looked her dead in the eye and said, I want to thank you for coming forward. Too many women suffer in silence. I knew exactly how that felt. A week later, I got an invitation. The senior advocacy group I joined wanted me to be the keynote speaker for their annual event. I'd never spoken in public before beyond my little interview. But something in me knew I had to do it. I stood on stage in front of nearly 300 people. Women and men, seniors, families, caretakers. I told them my story. I told them about the brunch. About being called just the babysitter. About selling the house and finding freedom at 72. About silence. About betrayal. About rebuilding. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then a woman stood and began to clap. Then another. Then another. Soon the entire auditorium was on their feet. Applauding. Crying. Holding one another. 'Cause my story was their story. And theirs was mine. After the event, a young woman approached me. Barely 25. Her voice trembled. My grandmother raised me, she said. She passed last year. I never told her thank you. I took so much for granted. But hearing you, I feel like she's still here. And I'm going to live differently because of you. Hugged her. That night, I sat in my little garden, thinking about how far I'd come. Had no mansion. No luxury. But I had peace. I had dignity. Had myself. Then my phone rang. It was Mitchell. I let it ring. I wasn't ready yet. Not because I wanted to punish him. But because I needed him to sit in the silence he once left me in for so long. He sent a text after. I know I don't deserve it. But if you ever want to talk, I'm here. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I smiled just slightly. 'Cause now the choice was mine. And that was the first true gift he'd given me in years. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you believe that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all, it's peace. And in the final chapter, I make one last decision that will shape the rest of my life. Don't miss it. The final decision came on a Sunday morning. I was sitting at my garden table, warm sunlight draped across my shoulders, the kettle whistling softly from the kitchen. My life had finally settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I was craving for years. Slow, gentle, peaceful. No more second-hand arguments through paper-thin walls. No more slammed doors. No more aching silences. But also, no more Jacob. It had been weeks since I last saw him. After his overnight visit, Lauren and Mitchell kept him close. I assumed they were scared I'd take him emotionally the way I'd taken back the house. What they didn't understand was, I never wanted to steal anything. I just wanted to be respected, included, loved. But you can't explain that to people who only hear control as a threat. Still, I missed him terribly. That morning, while I tended to my roses, the doorbell rang. I opened the front door, and there he was, Jacob, standing tall in his Sunday best, his tie crooked, eyes bright with something he could barely hold back. He stepped forward and handed me a folded piece of paper. It's from me, he said. And Mom and Dad said I could come today. Just for lunch. I took the paper with trembling fingers and watched as he ran into the kitchen to grab a cookie from the glass jar like he used to when he was little. I unfolded the paper. It was a letter. Dear Grandma, I know they were mean to you. I know I didn't always understand what was happening. But I love you. I never stopped. I want to see you more, and I told Mom and Dad that. They said I could if you want that too. I miss your pancakes and your hugs. Love, Jacob. Tears welled in my eyes. I bit my lip, letting the emotion rise without trying to suppress it. Not because he asked to come, but because this time it was his choice. After lunch, he and I walked through the garden talking about school and friends. He told me about his art project, his new love of jazz music, and how he sometimes listens to Nina Simone because it reminds me of how calm your house feels. I laughed. You've got taste, Jacob. I learned from the best, he said, nudging me playfully. As we sat on the back steps watching the sun go down, I felt something click into place. Forgiveness. Not for Lauren. Not even fully for Mitchell. But for myself. For all the years I silenced my instincts in the name of peace. For every time I swallowed pain and called it love. For how long it took me to realize. I was never just the babysitter. I was the mother, the backbone, the beginning of the story. And now, I was also the author of the rest of it. That evening, I finally sat at my desk and pulled out the letter Mitchell had sent weeks earlier. I read it again slowly this time. Carefully. Honestly. I picked up a pen. Dear Mitchell, I wrote. There are wounds between us that time alone won't heal. But I see you're trying. That matters. I'm not ready to forget. But I'm willing to see what healing looks like. With boundaries, with truth, and with accountability. I hope you're strong enough to meet me there. I sealed it and left it by the door for mailing. Because I wasn't going to chase closure. But I was willing to walk toward it. Days passed. Weeks. And then one afternoon Mitchell showed up at my door. Alone. He looked tired but not broken. He looked older, humbled. I came to say thank you, he said. For writing back. I nodded, stepping aside. We sat outside, not talking much. Just being. After a long while he said, we're selling the condo. We're moving to a smaller place. And I'm going to therapy. I didn't praise him. I didn't comfort him. I just said, good. He understood that was enough. And then he asked, almost shyly, can I come by next week? Help you with the garden. I looked at him for a long time. Then I said, you can come by. But the garden. That's mine. He chuckled softly. Fair enough. That evening, I returned to the kitchen and pulled a fresh pie out of the oven. I set it on the counter and stared out the window, watching birds flutter over the yard I had claimed once more as my own. I thought about Carla, who had moved to a new city, found a job, and sent me a postcard saying, thank you for being the kind of woman I aspire to be. I thought about the women who stopped me in grocery stores, whispering, I saw your story. You gave me the courage to leave. And I thought about that one Sunday brunch. The clink of mimosas. Laughter. The words that had burned me down to my bones. She's just the babysitter. Smiled. 'Cause now. I wasn't just anything. I was everything I needed to be, and more. I sold the house. I found my voice. And in doing so, came home to myself. If this story reminded you that it's never too late to take back your power, your peace, and your voice, then please like, comment, and subscribe. Someone out there needs to hear this. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's someone you love. But either way, never forget, you are not just a role. You are the story itself.